Hey listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss, how we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
All right. Well, welcome to episode 3 of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ace.
And I'm your other host, Alicia.
And we are fortunate to be blessed by the presence of Mr. Ken Peeples all the way from Philadelphia.
Hey, it's going well. Thanks for having me.
How's it, Ken?
It's going good. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah. No worries. I got the reaction whenever I say, how's it is a saying in Hawaii where we met and lived. And so I'll walk around and I'll say like, how's it, or aloha, and people look at me like, what are you talking about? How's what? Yeah. You're in Philly, right?
Yep, in Philly, born and raised, still based here. And I do most of my work here in the city.
How's the weather over there in Philly right now? We're moving into the fall.
Well, it is still warm. It's hot. We did have a week, maybe like 2 weeks ago, that was a little chilly, but now it's like we're full summer, man, back at it. So maybe by the end of the month, we'll probably start to have fall weather, but not right now. It's still very much summer over here.
Yeah, over here it doesn't really know what it wants to do. It's been raining a lot. We live in actually the most northern rainforest, at least in the U.S. or in the Western Hemisphere. I'm not sure about the whole world, but anyways, it's been raining, but the leaves started to fall.
The
leaves are. Walking down the trail, the leaves are under your feet, so it's moving a little faster up here in Alaska. But so we're glad to have you, Ken. Like I said, this is episode 3. I just recorded a different episode of a different podcast, The Critical Social Worker, yesterday, so I've been busy. But like I said, we're happy to have you. You have, what is it, a consulting agency that you're running right now, Sacred Realms Consulting?
Yeah, Sacred Realm Consulting is the consulting agency. So it's been soft launched. We didn't do a hard launch yet, but that should be happening by the end of October, if not sooner. But I am doing a lot of work through that entity right now.
Yeah, right on. Well, tell us how you got into social work.
Well, okay, so my background was undergrad, I studied African American studies and political science. So I'd always been working in human services organizations like nonprofits, was always doing that. One of my supervisors, she was a social worker, and she said to me, she graduated from Temple, and she said, you should consider going to get your MSW. And I didn't think much of it. This was a long time ago. This is like 2008, 2009. So I did eventually enroll in 2010, non-matriculated. And I think probably the first policy class I taught, the professor, he was an older white guy, and he had said something to me that was so poignant that that it really made me think, okay, I like this, and I like the fact that that it encourages this type of thinking or this sort of mindset, So what he said was, it was something about like we were writing about our like origins or like family origins, ethnic origins, national origins. And when we got to the national part, he said something specifically about, for some people, they may have a story that's a little bit more joyous than other people who may not even identify with like having a national identity because of their experience here. And the fact that he even understood that and he had that empathy just made me think, okay, all right, so I see where this is headed. So I took more courses, and then that's when I decided to officially enroll, like after a year of doing like part-time non-matriculation. So that's how I got to social work. So I always say social work chose me because I wasn't intentional about it at all. You know what I mean? Somebody said, you would be good at this. You should try it out. I took a look, and then I decided to enroll. But even after I got my MSW, I didn't know what that would look like, how I would be practicing and things like that. So I still had a lot of things to figure out in terms of that piece. But that's essentially how I got to social work.
It's interesting that you say that social work chose you, because I just was asked by students in one of my classes yesterday, and that it's a question I get asked often: how did you get into social work? And I said the same thing. It's a little bit different path for me, but social work totally chose me. I didn't even know what the term social work meant when when I chose it. And I think that actually I was doing the very best social work that I've ever done before I
Or
ever even started school, you know, when I was working with youth and whatnot. So, and I think you get that answer from a lot of social workers, not all of them, but you get that answer from a lot of social workers, especially, you know, social workers with, you know, uneven, troubled backgrounds, whatever, you know, didn't live the perfect life. I think some people do it for a career. Some people do it to give back. Some people do it for all those things. But definitely for me, just like you, Ken, I was, social work chose me. I was going about, you know, my world, and social work grabbed me up. And then I even tried to leave social work, and it reined me back in. So here we are.
not yet. It is different path for me, but same kind of thing because I was in the UK. Social work is so different, and it really wasn't on my radar at first. But when I went into, my dad was in finance, and so when I left university, went back to the island I'm from, Guernsey, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, and so I went into a similar field, and it was so hard for me working just with these millionaires, and it was in trust and managing their trust funds and all of that. And I said, I got to do something the complete opposite of this. And that's how I was like, I stumbled into social work. I don't even know how, but same sort of thing. I think it really just different paths, but social work does choose you in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I feel like for a lot of things, it's like also like how social work determines your practice. A lot of times, like, it's really about like you becoming the person you needed at a time when you were most vulnerable and becoming, and I find that usually a lot of times people tend to be geared towards like that kind of informs their practice. You know what I mean? I needed this at this point in time. I was part of this population and I wish I had this sort of help, you know? And to say another thing about how we kind of how I got into social work, but then like, I think Christian, like mine was a little bit opposite of yours, like how you tried to leave social work. Like now I'm trying to get into it, you know, because like even though I graduated with the MSW in 2014 officially, I wasn't practicing full time like most social workers do within the field, right? Like, so I did a dual master's program where I had an MPH as well. And so that's when my 9 to 5 was basically clinical research and anesthesia, right? But I was moonlighting as a social worker. So I was doing the work from 5 to, so I had my 9 to 5, but I was doing that work from 5 to 9. And then also on weekends which is when we ran the diversion program. So I was always social work adjacent, but I was always trying to find a way to be more, to get more deeply involved into the work. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about that now, because we are talking about, you know, revolutionary social work, decolonizing social work, critical social workers. So I'm sure I'll be able to expound and elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things we can touch on, but I want to go back when you said a minute ago, you said, you know, what was the exact phrase that you used or the words that you used, something about, you know, get into social work is like becoming a person to help your older self or something. How did you say that? Your younger self? How'd you say that?
I don't remember exactly what I said, but I know like it gives you the framework or even the language and the understanding to be the person you needed when you were at your most vulnerable, right? So like for example, you know, I went through some financial trauma when I was a kid, but I didn't know it was financial trauma back in the day. You know, I had parents divorced and living situations changed and, you know, things like that. But so now I have a program called Project Equity, which, you know, seeks to circumvent home foreclosures and keeping families in their homes. You know what I mean? Just because we have a big issue here with Philly with like a lot of developers and people from out of town and out of the country buying up a lot of property, and it's misplacing a lot of the native people here. And it's an issue, and it's an issue that can be mitigated if we play defense and connect people with the resources that they need to be connected to. So that is an example of how I felt like I needed to become the person that I wish my parents had during this time to help navigate whatever they were going through. You know what I mean? Because it leaves a really damaging and financially, you know, after a divorce, it's just devastating for both parties, you know? So, and then the kids, when you have kids involved, like I was, you know, it's devastating for them too. So this is an example of me being the person, like, or trying to help people, you know, not have the same experience that I had when I was 16 and my parents divorced, you know? So that's an example of how we become the person that we needed at a specific time, or the people in our lives needed at a specific time.
Yeah, and I would add to that too is that, you know, learning these skills, self-application before you're helping other folks. Being a social worker allows you to, if you're willing and then it allows you to help yourself before you help anyone else. And then all through the process of it, you continuously help yourself and continuous transformation. But what you were talking about it reminded me of this poem I like to share from Tupac. It's called Sometimes I Cry. And he says, sometimes when I'm alone, I cry because I'm on my own. The tears I cry are bitter and warm. They flow with life, but take no form. I cry because my heart is torn, and I find it difficult to carry on. If I had an ear to confide in, I would cry among my treasured friends. But who do you know that stops that long to help another carry on? The world moves fast, and it would rather pass you by than to stop and see what makes you cry. It's painful and sad, and sometimes I cry, and no one cares about why. And the reason I share that poem is because I just think it epitomizes, it gives you a good insight into Tupac too, but it just shows you, it allows us to reflect and look at how many folks are out there with the simple, I shouldn't say simple problem, with the complex problem of always, or not always, but feeling like they want to cry, feeling like they need to cry, and they don't feel like they have anybody that would take the time out of their life just to listen to them, to listen to what they're going through. And I just wanted to share a quick experience. When I was doing my undergraduate practicum, I'm different. I'm an outside of the box person. So they struggled to find me with a place, good for both parties. And they put me eventually they settled at a domestic violence institution not an institution, but an agency where I worked with the DV offenders and other folks and kids and stuff too. But with the DV offenders, I went in there and I was like, these Alaskan mofos are not going to want to talk to us. And I just got to Alaska, and I was like, these guys are not going to want to work with me. They're not going to want to talk to me. Not to mention it's hard to work with DV offenders just because you have to read and hear about some of the things that they had done. It's not easy to hear about child abuse or domestic violence and things like that. But when I would go and talk to these guys, sit in there and they'd start talking to me. And like one example, he's this big guy, beard, hard, gruff Alaska man. I was like, he's not going to want to talk to me. And I'd read his thing and, he'd had a brutal life of his own and just got out of prison for, abuse and things like that. And I started to talk to him and he started talking and, after like 3-4, hour-long sessions, he's still talking. And he reflects to me and he's like, I never talked to anybody ever in my whole life like this. Nobody has ever listened to me, not since when I was a child, not when I was an adult. I'm ashamed of the things that I've done, but I want to do better. I just feel like I don't have anybody to talk to, and I'm all like going through this on my own. When I was in prison, I felt like I was on my own. When I was a kid, I felt like I was on my own. And I just think there's so many of us. I say us because I felt that way in my own life. I still feel that way sometimes today. Sometimes today I'm helping everybody else, and I don't feel like there's anybody else. There's nobody listening to me. But I think it's somewhat of a reflection of our culture in the world, but in the United States of America, don't you think that for some reason we don't always place a value on such things, and we let folks go through their lives, through their day, through their school, through their whatever it is, and we don't take the time to sit and listen to them. And to me, that's the core of social work. That's what it was all supposed to be about. Add some thoughts if you want, you too.
Right. Yeah. There's so many times. And I mean, when you go back to DV offenders, when they were kids, if they had someone that they could have sat down and talked to and processed what had probably happened to them that they are now repeating to other people, then that whole generational cycle would have been halted. So it's so important for us to do that and not lose that core of social work, because a big problem I have with social work right now is how standardized it's become. And it's trying to become more scientific and, evidence-based, obviously important, but I think we're trying to become something that we weren't originally and we don't need to be. That there's fields of that, right? Social work, we're there for people, to listen to people, on a human level, to see them in a holistic way. Yeah, and if that guy, I'm just imagining him, if he had you or someone else to talk to as a kid, would he be sitting in that seat at that point in his life, in adulthood? There's a good chance he wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. In a much improved world, we would have opportunities for folks to sit down and talk to each other. I'm a big believer in talking circles, so I think that the world would be completely revolutionized, whether you're talking about a small school district, a town, or whether it was implemented at a state level or nationally, if children participated in like dialogic talking circles, had dialogue in a talking circle where they shared about their thoughts and their feelings and the things that they're going through, and everybody listened to each other, then those kids, by the time they became adults, would have built up the listening skills, which many of them don't have. They'd build up the skills of self-reflection and thinking. They'd build up the skills of empathy. You'd see a lot of things like bullying and, mistreatment of each other go down, cliques go down, because it's hard to bully somebody when you know their real story and you can see beneath, whatever it is. And when they've also heard your story and listened to you, you probably ain't going to bully each other, you know what I mean, or pick on you or take advantage of each other.
I think that kid was really fortunate. That guy was really fortunate to bump into somebody like you. You're probably the first time that encounter with you was probably the first time somebody even like took any interest in listening to his story and listening to understand, you know what I mean, as opposed to just, finding him to be annoying or whatever, you know what I mean? So I think when it comes to empathy, you really need that in this profession. And also, it's about the self-care piece too. Like you were mentioning how, having a fill into you. And I like to use the analogy that you hear when you're going to get on a plane, secure your mask first before you can fasten somebody else's, you know what I mean? You're no good to anybody else if you're not doing the self-care and doing what you need to do for yourself. You cannot pour it into anybody in that state, So, or at least like they say, you can't pour from an empty cup. So yeah. And also what you said reminded me of like, there's a lot like that guy you spoke to. There's a lot of brilliant guys that like slip through the cracks, just because they don't get the support that they need. And it's why I really try to target the 16 to 24-year-olds, because I feel like that's a very pivotal age range especially for young black men, right? And I think about, it reminds me of like reading like the autobiography of Malcolm X when he was talking about, it was one, I don't remember which chapter, it's been years, over a decade since I read it, but I think he was talking about West Indian Archie, and he was talking about him and a bunch of other guys that he knew in the hood who were just brilliant. Like West Indian Archie was like a mathematician. He kept all the numbers up here, right? And he just said if that was cultivated, if that was nurtured, if he was given the right opportunities in the right schools, he could have been like a freaking physicist or a rocket scientist or something like that with his math skills. So at least some type of engineer or something, So like what you get when you invest in people, and when these guys don't feel like they're all alone, they get the support they need. They get guys like you, Christian, that, will work with them and, they can feel like they have value and they have a good example. You know what I'm saying? So like, there's a lot and I hate to see so many of these guys get like slip through the cracks and then end up incarcerated and things like that, because nobody else is going to do anything for them. It has to be us, So we have to come up with the programming. We have to come up with the funds. We have to find ways to like serve the people in the community as best we can. And I don't think we should be relying on anybody to come save us at all.
Yeah, well, I think that's also a reflection of our culture, to keep it on Malcolm X, one of his biggest saviors, you might say, or biggest life events that changed his trajectory was when he was in prison, right? And he had he had access to that special library. I can't remember what it was, a special library with all sorts of stuff in there. And I remember he was talking about he started reading the dictionary or not the dictionary, but the encyclopedia, starting with aardvark. And I think he actually recites what an aardvark is in that book. But anyways, he had access to this special library, right, which he was able to educate himself. He's autodidactic. As smart and intelligent as he was, he taught himself. And you think about like what's happened to prisons since that era, and they've wiped out most programs or most like libraries such as that. And so very little. And even I don't know if you ever communicate with prisoners before, but even then, in just the 10 years that I've been doing it, they've taken away this and taken away this and taken away that. And so now, where you used to be able to send somebody a handwritten letter with a photo and stuff like that, now I think if you are writing somebody in Pennsylvania, you send the letter to Florida, they photocopy it and give them a black and white copy of it, and they shred the photo or whatever. So if you sent them an old photo of their mom or something like that from back in the days, they would copy it in Florida, shred it, and then send them a black and white copy of it. And I guess my point is just that I think it's a reflection of our society. We don't value those things. We don't value helping prisoners. We value putting them in there and punishing them. but we don't value helping them. And in my experience, that's evidence whenever I talk about incarceration. I shouldn't say whenever, but 90% of the time when I talk to somebody about inmates or people that are incarcerated, they run the other directions. They don't want nothing to do with it. They won't even have a conversation with me about it.
Right. And then we wonder why reoffending rates are so high. Because of this, we're not doing, prisons aren't there for rehabilitation in America.
100%. That was going to be my point and my response. Like, it's such a race to the bottom. And it's like that story you just told me about sending a photo to one spot or sending a letter with a photo enclosed to one spot just to then have it photocopied and sent to another spot or the actual inmate. It's just like, it reminds me of like the neoliberal takeover of like the prisons, which means like there's no incentive for rehabilitation. There's no incentive to get people out. There's only incentive to put people in because it's a money-making enterprise. So like, of course there wouldn't be any rehab. Of course they don't want people to learn anything, become educated, read books or anything like that, because that would have a negative impact on recidivism rates. That would see them go down. They don't want that. They want them to go up. You know what I mean? And even now, like, if we're talking about broader society and we're talking about prisons, I mean, look at all the cop cities turning up everywhere. You know what I mean? I just feel like the establishment knows that there may be some social unrest as the living standards like diminish here. And so they're just getting ready for whatever they need to do to warehouse people or whatever on a mass scale. I don't know what's going on, but like, yeah, so I think society is, especially in the U.S., is absolutely 100% backwards. If you want to have a, very egalitarian society where people are feeling healed, people are happy, people are getting their needs met, even their basic needs met at the very least, you know what I mean? That is not here, and that is not happening, and that's why we have this situation. It seems like, just based on the federal government and like what it seems like they want to exacerbate this, and they're okay with this. They're okay with mass incarceration. They're okay and I think Michelle Alexander actually argued that point very convincingly. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard of him, but there's a man, the co-leader of the American Indian movement back in the 60s and 70s. He just died recently, Russell Means. And I was watching an interview with him, and he said that what's happening to America is basically that America's been turned into a large Indian reservation as it was conceived of back in the days, meaning that, people that were settling in the United States and not everybody was different, there's a lot of people, but they're quick to take the land from Indians, from Native Americans. And, whenever it became, profitable or any other way, such form, or when they wanted to renege on the deal, they did so, right? And so if you look at what an Indian reservation looked like back in the days, now I'm not talking about a present day Indian reservation, I'm talking about back in the days, they were only allowed to shop at the stores using the script that they gave them, right? And so even if, we're not that young, Ken, I don't know exactly how old you are, but we're not that young. I'm sure you remember a little bit that how things were just a couple decades ago, like shopping wise, right? You had a lot of local stores, like you might be able to go to a butcher, for example, and get your meat. You go to local stores. Not saying none of those exist at all, but for the most part, folks shop at Walmart, at Costco, at the same exact stores that they tell you can shop at. And even like Costco, for example, it was kind of like when it came out, right? It was kind of like this membership privilege thing. And now it's just another thing where everybody goes to. And so I guess my point is that, there's no incentive for them to heal all of us. The incentive is for them to have us in jail and to have us having to pay, not being able to own a home and to have to rent from them and to only buy from the stores that are from them. I didn't even add Amazon on there, right? Amazon too. And so we're in this state where you think you have all this freedom, but you really actually, you don't have freedom to even do the basic stuff that folks did, even 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. You don't have that freedom. You have the freedom to live within the constraints that are set up for you right now. And as we can see, those are changing right now with housing, right? The housing prices have like skyrocketed, even since you and I have been married and been trying to look, has skyrocketed everywhere. In Utah, in Hawaii, in Alaska, every place that we look, they've went way up. And so from my perspective, what it looks like to me is that those big whatever they are, BlackRock, Vanguard, they're trying to buy up all the stuff. And so you don't own shit. And I've heard people say this, Charles Schwab and shit say this on in interviews that, you ain't going to have personal property anymore. And I'm not saying materialism is the only way to go. I'm just saying that if I don't have the personal property, that means that you got it and I have to pay you for it and you get to dictate. We've all probably had a landlord before, and some of them are better than others, but they have a lot of power over you.
So much.
So it seems to me that's where they're trying to funnel us, is like what Russell Means says, is that, they strip this away and they strip this away and they strip this away. And every time there's an emergency, whether it's a pandemic or a war, they strip more of it away. And you don't realize that you've given up those rights. And then by the time, or you may never realize, and then by the time people do realize it, they're already gone.
Yeah. And I really don't think we realize how nefarious everything is behind the scenes. Like, things that I only recently just learning about is like the mergers of big companies like Bayer and Monsanto merging together. And it's a pesticide company who's been proven to cause cancer, merging with a medical company who produces cancer treatment medication. Like, this is happening behind the scenes, and it's the power that these people have within the prison systems, within the food industry, all of that. It's so nefarious. The tobacco one too, right? The tobacco company that bought out Kraft. And so we have tobacco giants making and marketing junk food in the same.
It's even more nefarious than that. They took the way that they manipulated people with cigarettes, addictive things with cigarettes, and when the climate changed on, being making you sick, making people sick and giving them cancer, well, they bought the food companies and they used the same methods that they did to addict people. And that's why you go to the store and you see everybody eating all the processed. I was a victim of this most of my life, eating all this super ultra processed food, thinking it's real, and it's addicting. And so, and then we talk about healthcare, and those same people are invested in healthcare.
Right.
And so it's just an ongoing cycle of keeping you caught up in it. I think, remember that it's a kid's film, Ernest and Celestine, where the dentist, the dad's a dentist, and the dad owns a sweet shop and the mom's a dentist, and they sit there and they talk about, well, we got to get him to eat the sweets so the teeth are fucked up, and then they can come in here and get their teeth fixed. And it's an ongoing cycle
of our world, completely.
I have so many thoughts. I don't even know where to start. All right. So I think we're in a place where, and I say neoliberalism a lot because, we're basically in a world of neoliberalism on steroids. I remember that quote that Klaus Schwab said, something he said about you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? So the way they're trying to set everything up is that you have to pay them rent for everything. Everything is a commodity. Even the water you drink that you need to stay alive, the oxygen you breathe, eventually it's probably going to get to that point. We're dealing with people who will poison you just to sell you an antidote, right? They create issues just to sell you. They create markets just so they can profit, right? So when we talk about BlackRock and it's even like the stock market. Like, I think the U.S. stock market is so overvalued. Like, all these companies are just buying back their own shares and inflating their share prices. Like, you're really not, your valuation is not where it says it is. It's not, right? And it's the same thing with the housing market. BlackRock owns so many vacant houses that are just sitting there ready to be lived in. Nice family just waiting to move in, but because it's a fake inflation of the market to keep the prices up, you know what I mean? They don't want to sell those houses, so they're just sitting on them. You know what I mean? So everything is just so fake. You know what I mean? Everything is like controlled. You know what I mean? And I learned this a lot during the pandemic when I really started getting knee deep into investing, but how does it really work, right? And then when we talk about food and tobacco, I think probably the first time I can really say I got red pilled was when I wrote a paper on environmental tobacco smoke for one of my public health courses. I wound up getting an A- on that paper, and I'll never forget this because she said it's too comprehensive. I'll never understand that. Okay, A- because it was too comprehensive. Okay, but I learned so much on because I really went into the history of how these people would produce junk science, like a bunch of BS, and they would have scientists on their payrolls at universities willingly doing this. A complete conflict of interest. And not only that, outright disingenuous and like just lying. You know what I mean? And so they would just, the whole point was just to muddy the waters and say, well, we don't think that. They wouldn't necessarily take issue with the findings. It would more so be the methodology. Well, we think if you did this, then maybe the outcome would have been different. No, none of that trying to like obfuscate. This is like terrible. This is wrong. Like, and it was a back and forth in the scholarship for like 30 years that I dug through before they finally like, okay, the evidence is there. We cannot ignore it anymore. We have to regulate cigarette companies now. You know what I mean? So it's like, we are at a spot where like the people aren't protected by the government at all from corporations. And like you were just saying, how corporations merge and things like that. And now it's like a one-stop shop for everything. It reminds me of this movie that I used to love back in the day called RoboCop. And they had this big corporation called OCP, and they ran everything in the city. They owned the cops. They were like the mayor. They were everything, right? I feel like that's what we're getting to. And what happens when you have the merging of corporations in the state, right? Because I feel like that's what's happening with like Google has all these government contracts. A bunch of other private corporations have government contracts and things like that. So when you have the marriage of the state and corporations, that's one tenet of fascism. And I feel like we're closer to it. I mean, the Democrats are using it as like a talking point. We'll have fascism if you don't, but I feel like we're kind of low key already there.
Right.
Let's talk about that. It's funny that you transitioned there because that's exactly where I wanted to go.
See, we got that synergy, Christian. We got that synergy, brother.
Curse this, but yeah, yeah. Social work. So social work is like, let me put this: dissent is the antithesis of social work. In social work, in the mainstream field of social work, people are conformists everywhere from in education to, NASW to, the different laws in different states, the different methods. Everything is you're supposed to be a conformist. And one of the ways that social workers conform today is via the Democratic Party. And my problem with it is that being somebody, people, individuals, groups that criticize both the left and the right, there's really no place for you today in today's society, let alone in the field of social work. Because if you, like you mentioned, if you criticize the Democrats, well, you're supporting fascism or something. But I ain't supporting Donald Trump. I'm criticizing the Democrats, and the Republicans. But I'm saying just because I criticize one does not mean I support the other, for example. Right. And if you go to, and we've talked about this, but if you go to any of the NASW's social media sites and you look at their posts, anything political is literally the exact same thing that the DNC would say. Literally the exact same thing. There's no scrutiny. There's no nothing. They have whatever it is. They have their little committee or board. I don't know what they're called, but that political board that they endorse candidates now. The first time was Biden last time, and now it's Harris. And what they're really doing, they're not really endorsing anyone because they don't talk about anything that they'll do. What they're doing is they're endorsing against Donald Trump, which I guess, I don't want Donald Trump either, but I'm saying that if you don't hold your own people accountable and you don't push them in any way for anything for your endorsement, then it means nothing. And what you're talking about, the beginnings of fascism is the marriage between, corporations and government. Well, the Democrats are all about that. The people that, if Kamala Harris is elected as president, the people that she's going to put in her cabinet are those people, literally those people. But we don't even talk about it, and you don't even hear about it. It's so skewed in this world is that, when I didn't know that much about Donald Trump I knew a little bit, but only like via commercials and stuff. I knew who he was. But then when he ran for president, I was like, this is a joke. This fat asshole is not, there's no way people are going to vote for this guy. And I'd read about his diet and the things that he ate. And I was like, why would you want a leader, that scarfs down on Big Macs and Filet-O-Fish from McDonald's every single day and drinks soda all day? That is not somebody that's a leader for you. And so I'm conflicted about RFK Jr. I don't know if he's telling the truth or whether he's doing what he can to get power, but he sure the hell is talking about things that nobody ever talks about, such as that we were talking about, like changing chemicals in our food and changing those systems and the corruption in government. And I don't hear anybody else talking about that. So how the hell did that guy end up on the Republicans? And how did the Democrats not? And I don't, I hear the Democrats bitching about RFK joining Trump and that he's crazy and stuff. But I don't hear any Democrats talking about changing the chemicals in food and being more healthy and divorcing, corporate power from, from politics. And you might hear like a few people in the Democrats say like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, but they don't do anything about it. They're so full of shit. They just, they go and they join the mass of the collective of the Democrats right afterwards. They don't hold them accountable for anything.
And then all these mergers are happening behind the scenes on their watch. So as social workers,
it's them doing it.
Right. And so how can we as social workers, when it negatively impacts the people, us as a community, our communities that we work with, when it impacts them so detrimentally, how can we then endorse candidates that are doing it? It's crazy to me.
It's just crazy that there's not more of a dialogue or a conversation about what it takes to get an endorsement, that they have a committee for the NASW that supposedly represents the National Association of Social Workers. There's no other one. There's no alternative to that. And that they endorse a candidate who, I'll let you talk, Ken. I'm not going to ramble anymore.
All right. So I'll just say I am not a fan of the Democratic Party. In fact, with a passion, I dislike that party. And I'll tell you why. First, let me talk about something that you mentioned first, like in terms of like social work being this whole idea of being conformist. Like I'm a non-conformist, so which is why I don't work out in agencies that employ social workers. Like I have to do this work on my own. Otherwise, like I wouldn't be doing any real meaningful work to me, right? But one thing I notice about a lot of folks, especially around election time, and I feel like some of the most intelligent people I know become some of the most anti-intellectual individuals that I'm just like, what happened? What happened to your critical thinking faculties between now and like when this election started, bro? Like, because like the Democrats, like the Dems, like the DNC, like train their base so well. They're so good at it, train their base to just like whenever they hear something that's not on brand with the Democrats, they reflexively will say, since it's Kamala running, they'll reflexively think, oh, you don't like black women. Oh, you're for Trump. Oh, you this and that. It's just like the talking points are put into their head with precision, surgical precision. And for some reason, they just can't there's like, I don't know, remind me of Carter G. Woodson, like the Miseducation of the Negro. They were like the front cover of their book had like a black woman with like a metal like thing on her head with a lock on it, right? It's just like, that's who they turn into. Like they basically just repeat narratives that they hear and they don't think through anything on their own. And I feel like the Democrats are really, they really zero in on two demographics, in my opinion, black women and the LGBTQ community. So they zero in on them, make them the center of the party. So to make it as if, hey, if you don't like us, then you're against black women, you're against the LGBT, or you like Trump. I'm like, no, can we have an intellectual conversation here where I can be critical of the Democrats and still not support Trump? Like, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like, can we just have a real conversation? Can we think for a second? And as far as the NASW, it's funny because I was just on one of their calls to do a CEU training, or to be part of a CEU training. And at the top of the training, we had somebody from, I think, North Carolina or the national chapter talking about, as a social worker, you must vote, you must do this, like we must take this election. I mean, obviously, I think NASW got some orders from the DNC, or maybe it might have been a gift or something, but they're pushing this super hard. And not only that, but they're not saying anything about the issues that we might. Okay, so before I bring this up, let me talk about RFK Jr., because I think he left the Democratic Party the same reason why Tulsi Gabbard left. And that's because like they know that it's an inside game and you're not in it. You cannot, like, it's nothing democratic about that party. It is a corporation. All right. So like I like RFK Jr. a lot. I like his politics in terms of like, especially when he had a lot of things he had to talk about in terms of like the shutdown and COVID and the health implications of taking the shot. I think people were afraid to debate him on that for good reason, especially the people who are anointed on CNBC, MSNBC, CNN. Those people are scared to debate him. And the networks weren't interested in having that debate because they don't want to touch that, right? My only issue with RFK Jr. is that it's just like, again, when we're talking about people with principle, and then all of a sudden the principles just go out the window, get him started talking about Israel and Gaza and the genocide. All of a sudden he's just like, Israel has the right to defend itself.
Exactly.
Israel's this, Israel's, it's just, he goes right to the talking point. So that's why I just, whatever with him, you know what I mean? And then another issue that I have with him, Tulsi, and a lot of black guys, and I'm trying to understand, the barbershop conversation is lit, I'm trying to tell you. So what I'm trying to understand with the black guys in my community, the ones who specifically want to vote for Trump, and I'm wondering, I'm like, so I understand why y'all don't want to vote for the Democratic Party. I understand they do absolutely nothing for us. All they are about is identity politics and virtue signaling and optics. They don't want to do anything of substance at all. You know what I mean? They're not running on anything of substance at all. They just want, oh, well, like what Biden said, oh, well, things are better. You got interracial couples on TV now. How is that feeding people? How is that ending mass incarceration? How is that doing anything for the climate? That's not doing, how's that housing unhoused people? That doesn't do anything for anybody. That's just some feel good dopamine hit that they want y'all, that they want everybody to be like, high off of, you know what I mean? But, they're not talking about anything in terms of like, Kamala's still talking about we're going to build the most lethal military. Who kids you trying to send over to go fight in Ukraine? Who you trying to do that? Whose kids you planning to do that with? Okay, you want to build the most lethal military. Okay, and you're talking about some you're going to keep funding and sending military aid, sending all these weapons to Israel when you're trying, but at the same time you're talking we need a ceasefire. Come on, get out of here. But the NASW is not going to talk about those issues at all. They don't. I would love to invite them to a space like this and let's have a conversation on why we should be supporting the Democratic Party with these things on the table. So we just supposed to reward them in their policy positions on Israel, Gaza, and genocide, and just endless war and mass incarceration, and they're not doing anything for our community. And when I talk to black women in particular, I'm like, why y'all going so ham for the Democratic Party? They don't do anything for y'all. Like, look, all right, like as a person with a public health background, I'm looking at the stats. I'm looking at the macros. I'm still seeing black maternal mortality being so much higher than everybody else's. What are the Democrats doing about that? What are they doing about black infant mortality? They're not doing anything about that. What are they doing about black people being homeless? We're like, in a lot of states, we're like the highest homeless population. They're not doing anything about that. They're not doing anything that helps us specifically, but they'll come around every 4 years with a handout and then want to gaslight you and then cancel you if you don't do what they tell you to do. So it's not a transactional relationship here. It's not a quid pro quo. It's just like a do what we tell you and obey, and maybe you'll be okay. And we'll just distract you with basketball games, football games, and have Megan Thee Stallion twerking on stage, and like that'll give you the dopamine hit, so you'll feel better. So that's where I stand with all that, and I'll stop rambling.
Well, I was thinking about this just yesterday, actually. It came to my mind. Ain't that some shit that the election is right when NBA starts, when NFL's in full swing?
Oh, my God.
Like, ain't that, I mean, the World Series might even be going on. I don't even know when that ends. Anyways, but it made me think of, everything you're talking about made me think of this quote from Pablo Escobar. And again, just because I'm talking about Pablo and saying a quote doesn't mean I'm endorsing his character. But anyways, Pablo Escobar, if you don't know him, the Colombian drug lord back from the 80s, 90s. He was doing an interview, and they asked him about like all the violence in Colombia and the world via, the cocaine trade. And he said, well, look, you all Americans always like to say that, but there's two key facts that you Americans always overlook. And there's two of them. One is that Colombians don't buy cocaine. We don't buy it. We don't pay. There's no money for it here in Colombia. And we don't make guns. We don't buy guns. We don't sell cocaine here. So all the cocaine goes to America, and you guys send us all the guns. You guys provide us with the weapons. And so I think that kind of shows, that's a microcosm of what's happening in the world today, whereas lots of folks want to look at like the Democrats or even American government, right, as the good guys. People still look at that. I had somebody not too long ago, real drunk, tell me, America's got its problems or something, but you can't argue against that. We're basically, I don't remember exactly what it said, but we're basically the good guys, out there in the world. But how can you be the good guys when we make all the guns? We make all the guns and we send them all. There's wars going on and we fund almost all of them. And then I'm no expert on like the Middle East and Iran or nothing like that, but we like to point a finger at Iran all the time. But how can we point a finger at Iran for being extremist when we don't look at our own selves and all the weapons and the governmental folks that are making money off the weapons, this ongoing cycle of the military industrial complex. But in a nutshell, the fact of the matter is the world is at violence. The globe, the earth is in violence because America makes the weapons and gives them out and tries to dictate who and what should use them. And often they get in the other team's hands too. So, just like we were talking about the cycle of health and money and blah, 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 and all that stuff, it's the same thing with war. It's not going to stop because every couple of $1 billion that they send to Ukraine, that they send to Israel, well, that, and they'll say that straight out that, that money is actually going to Raytheon and Boeing and these companies that make the weapons and whatnot. But they're all invested in those companies. And so literally that by, say some politician voting to send money to Ukraine or to Israel, they're literally sending that money into their own pocket, a smaller amount of that. Not to mention, which I'm really surprised that people don't do more often, just go Google. Seriously, it'll be the first search result you do up. It's not even hidden. What politicians take money from Israel or AIPAC, and how much do they get? And it's all of them on both sides of the aisle. All the big dogs that everybody loves, from Republicans and Democrats, they all take millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, starting with Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. Who else is on there? Ted Cruz, all of them. Nancy Pelosi is on there. All of them are on there. So it's very not confusing why they keep voting to send money around the world and why they don't care about violence or whatnot. And I think the most thing that I'm confused about is not that those politicians that I just named send the money over there. I already know about them. But like, how do people like AOC dupe everyone and then they support those things basically? They might come out against it a little bit, but they vote or they are absent or they don't stand up for it in any way, shape, or form. And I shouldn't say they, like all of them, because there are a couple politicians that do speak up and they're hit hard by AIPAC. When they do that, then AIPAC sends all the money over there and they, get that person voted out. That's another thing that bothers me, politics, the democratic process. Well, if I live in Alaska, right, the democratic process should only include Alaskans. It shouldn't have Californians dumping money into the Democratic nominee in Alaska beyond any amount that Alaskans could ever put into it, if that makes sense. And so actually Alaskans don't really determine the election. They get to go vote, but all the media and all the advertisements and everything they've been told come from somewhere else, from the DNC. Sorry, that was we keep apologizing, but I got to cut out all the apologies.
Ken has something brewing. What do you got?
Yeah, it's so, man, look, I'm so glad that you touched on the war part, specifically. Like when Afghanistan was over, I didn't know where the U.S. military was going to go next, and I didn't expect Ukraine to be the place where they would instigate another conflict. I thought they would probably go somewhere to Venezuela, because listen, this is all a racket. Everything you said about, so we're giving $1 billion to Ukraine. That's not leaving the United States. That's going to Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, General Dynamics, Lockheed. You know what I mean? So it's like, in fact, they even said, I think it was the end of last year, I'll find that clip. They were saying, I think it was MSNBC, or it might have been, I forget what outlet it was, but they were saying, like, one politician was actually selling, see, this is coming to you. You're getting jobs. So, like, support the war machine so you can get a job. You know what I mean? So bombing people on the other side of the planet. You know what I'm saying? And, like, I would love to ask your friend who thinks that America is like, what do you say? We're the good guys? I would love to get his opinion on the Wolfowitz Doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine, and PNAC, Plan for a New American Century. There's a bunch of neocons. They had a think tank, and I would love to hear what he had to say about their rebuilding America's defenses, because this is literature that's behind the scenes that the government produces and tells you everything that they want to do, and it's totally different from what they report to you from MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, The Economist, Washington Post, all that stuff, right? So I consider that, all that to be MSNBC, CNN, all that is the marketing for the empire, right? This is what they want the population to think. You know what I mean? Now, I also watch a lot of State Department press briefings, DOD press briefings, the White House press briefings. So you have like Karine Jean-Pierre. They got a lot of people of color. They got an Indian woman who is at the DOD press brief, Sabrina Singh, I think her name is. They got another guy at the State Department, Indian guy. And then there's a John Kirby and a Matt Miller, Smirky Love, they call him. Because he's always smirking while he's talking about, glossing over Israeli. Oh.
The last two names that I never knew about them, Kirby and Matt, whatever his name is, Matt Miller, whatever his name
Miller. Is. Yeah, Matt Miller.
Kirby. Yeah. And I never knew who those. Yeah, Matt Miller. I never knew who those guys were until recently, And I got one thing to say. I can't stand those motherfuckers. I'm sorry for the language, but I
Yeah,
can't
man.
stand those
No, no,
motherfuckers, man.
absolutely. I understand
That makes me
100%.
sick to my stomach every time I see him answering questions.
Yeah, man. Like Matt Miller always smirking when he's like talking about, well, Israel gets to defend itself and this and that. I mean, it's insufferable. But also, like talking about AOC, it just shows, it just confirms my idea that like you cannot go into these spaces looking to make reforms and changes. Like you're just going to end up being co-opted or bored out or just like so AOC, okay, whatever. When they flipped Cori Bush, because she was a real activist down in St. Louis. She was like leading a lot of the stuff down there where Mike Brown was killed, was murdered. She was really doing really real work in the community. You know what I mean? But then once she gets to Congress and like she pulled one stunt the other, I think it was last year when they were sleeping out on the Capitol steps, and it was completely a stunt. I forget the details about that. I can circle back for it. But like, once they flipped her, I knew the whole, the marketing around the squad was just going to be like another way for them to sheepdog you back into the Democratic Party, kind of like Bernie is now. Like he got totally cucked. I'm like, dude, you see what they did to you in 2015, 2016.
Oh.
You see what they did again in 2019, 2020, and now you're just going to like stand for these people after they did that to you? No, dude. Like, so that now Bernie is an op too, because like you really going to try to like shamelessly like sheepdog all of you was on the precipice of building a movement, bro. And then like you just going to give it all away and just say, hey, vote for the Democrats. No, you weren't really serious from the get-go now. Now I believe that.
That was Bernie was my eye-opening because I was that's the only time I ever donated to a candidate.
Me
So
too.
we held
That was
we
my
were in
first
Honolulu,
act,
but we had a
dude.
couple little events that we went to and hosted at our house. Because it's funny.
I think in terms of like the candidates, like in 2016, I voted for Jill Stein. Now the Democrats took the Greens off because she has a really great platform. I like her platform. I love where she stands on reparations. In fact, her and Butch Ware just cooked on the Breakfast Club. Angela Rye didn't come out of that looking too good. So, and again, it just shows when you're not standing on principle, you're standing on talking points from the people that pay you. And it comes off in the comments and it comes off, you know what I mean? So, and then what I want to say about 2019, the Democrats actually sued to get the Greens off the PA ballot in the 2020 election or the 2019 election, right? So my question to NASW or anybody who's a partisan Democrat, if the Democrats say that democracy is on the ballot, how is it that the Democrats suing to give us fewer choices on the ballot is more democratic? I challenge anybody to answer that question and explain that to me. I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and I think what it brings to mind for me is a little thought experiment. So, you could say, because the Democrats do literally what you're saying. They did it with RFK, they did it with Jill Stein, they do it with everybody. So, and like if you were to say, like, if you wanted to epitomize, if you wanted to reflect, true moral democracy, right? You would want as many individuals as possible to like share a debate or have dialogue and find out where we differ and stuff. But it's the exact opposite, right? That you go to have these debates between two folks. They don't answer any questions. They just sit there and say whatever they want. And so, but anyway, so you have Jill Stein, RFK, right? These white people. And you could say, well, we don't like them for this reason or whatever. But the Democrats are supposed to be for black people. And so you have a man named Dr. Cornel West. I know he doesn't have that much support for president, but he's a well-respected man for many, many years. He's an intellectual. He has, even if you don't agree with everything, he's a very good moral man. I watched him for years, and I would respect how, whether he went on a Democrat show or he went on Sean Hannity, he would shake their hand and he would say, hello, thank you for having me on here, my brother Sean, and talking to him. And so he's running for president. And do you think that the Democrats talk to him and like listen to what he says and give him somewhere to stand so that we can listen to, the leading black man as far as the presidential election is going? You won't even listen to him. You would instead, if he got any traction whatsoever, what you would do is spend as much money, spreading rumors about him, bringing down his name, getting him off the ballot. And so that's what the Democrats are. And I think Cornel West is the best one to look at that because they do the same thing to him, this nice, old, well-respected, intellectual black man. and they do the same thing to him as they would do to Tulsi Gabbard or RFK, right? They don't want you to even know he exists, and if you do know that he exists, they want to do everything they can to slander him so that you don't give him any traction whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. Dr. West was my first choice for president, and toward the beginning of his campaign, I feel like there were some weird anomalies that happened, and I don't think we'll ever be able to figure it out, but or get confirmation. But I just feel like with Dr. West in the beginning, the Democrats were livid that he wasn't running as a Democrat. I have so many clips of them saying, "Hey, why don't you run as a Democrat? Why don't you run as a Democrat? Why you run a third party? Run as a Democrat." Because they wanted him to be a sheepdog. They weren't going to give him the nomination. They don't even want to hear what he has to say. You know what I mean? The Democrats have no political will to pass the policy positions that we want. And also another thing to add to what they do, the shadiness, they'll fund Republican campaigns. They'll find the most like unappealing, most extremist Republican and fund that campaign just so the adjacent Democrat looks more moderate, as opposed to just having policies, positions that people want and being intentional about following through on them. They don't want to do that. They just want to look better for, again, it's a party of optics and a party of not doing anything for the people or the working class. That's all it is. I'm convinced of that, and I think the data bears that out. But another thing I was going to say, talking about Cornel West, like they were trying to get him into the party, but I don't understand why he left the Greens. Jill Stein is only running as a Green. She wasn't even going to run this cycle because Cornel stepped down as the Green candidate. So I would love to talk to him. I love Dr. West. Like that's my guy. I haven't talked to him in a while, I haven't seen him in a while, but I'm sure one day I'll get a chance to ask him that question. Like why exactly because I think he might have been talked to, in my opinion. I'm just speculating, but I think somebody might have threatened him or said something like, we're going to smear you and say you're the reason why our Democratic, or at the time Biden, lost, or this and that. You know what I mean? So I think somebody got to him. That's my hunch.
What's that guy's name? He was running on Hillary's campaign, and now he operates as like a dissenter from the Democratic Party. But he was
Doe?
He was involved with when Cornel West. He was his
Peter Dow. Peter Dow.
What's his name?
I think it's Peter Dow.
Peter Dow. I didn't know about him during the Hillary thing. I knew about him after that, and he's always posting like stuff against the DNC. But it's very, very interesting that he was all for Hillary, and then he dissented, and then he joined someone like Cornel West's campaign, and then there was something went on, and then they both left. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, isn't that weird?
Yeah, somebody else mentioned this before too. Yeah, Peter Dow, like, cause a lot of people, like I'm on Twitter, I won't call it X, it'll always be Twitter, are thinking like they not believe in Peter Dow at all. They're like, you don't just switch up like this dude after being like a total Hillary shit lib. I mean, he was a staunch shit lib, and then now he's like all want to be progressive.
Against Bernie.
Yeah, and so like a lot of people aren't buying it. I'm not buying it too. I mean, I follow him still now, but just to see what he has to say. But yeah, it's kind of sus, Christian. I agree with you. And I need to see more before I can start believing you. Once you switch up that, like to make that big of a transition.
Mm-hmm. And you find yourself in the middle of those other goings on. What makes Peter Dow so special that he's gonna, help Cornel West? I just don't get it.
Mm-hmm. All of this, just quickly, it all reminds me of when I was talking to Eddie Africa from Move, when he was saying about we cannot change or disrupt the system from within because of these issues. So all of these things happen, and it's just impossible to do it within. And so like in social work, but in politics and the government, like we have to have our own ways of doing it outside, and it's the only way it's going to change.
And speaking of that,
yeah, and this kind of goes back to what you were saying, like, okay, like for example, like you guys live in Alaska. I feel like any attempt to like disassociate with these systems, like I feel like the state is going to get a lot more repressive with that and want to keep you within their matrix. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
like I wonder sometimes, like if people want to, do solar energy or like do collect their own rainwater, things like that. You know what I mean? Like grow their own food as opposed to going to a supermarket and, you know, in big agri and things like that, supporting big agri. You know what I mean? I think if it hits a fever pitch, I think the state is going to intervene and be like, no, you must give your money to the corporations. I mean, they did it with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. That's exactly what it was to me. In my opinion, that policy is a net negative. Yes, I get it. I get that more people, by definition, will have access to care because they can't turn certain people away. However, it does not make healthcare any more affordable for people because the exchanges are so expensive to pay out of pocket. Like buying health insurance at a market rate is just crazy to me.
Yeah.
And then second of all, it's just like you're mandating people to buy private insurance. So if you don't even buy it on the private market, you're gonna take a hit come tax time. It's basically a subsidy for private third party insurance companies who have no reason to exist. Like we should have a universal single payer healthcare system. Why do we need these these entities?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying when it comes to this stuff, like when it comes to capitalism, neoliberalism, it's about creating a market so that people can get paid. You know what I mean? And those people that get paid are the people who are, you know, the economic elite. You know what I mean? These are the people who are making these decisions.
When I talk about the NASW, I'm not criticizing the NASW like everybody that's bad or that the events they put on are all bad or anything like that. I participated in several NASW events, and there's a lot of really nice people and a lot of people that put in a hell of a lot of hard work and have really good intentions and are really good people. I'm not saying that. It is a collective of social workers for sure. I'm saying on the organizational level, there's never, or the leadership level, there's no any kind of dissent or anything like that. And I don't remember the exact percentage, but Alan Detlef, do you know who Alan Detlef is? He's a abolitionist social worker, but he says that, he told me that more than like 75% of social workers are not registered with the NASW, but it's the National Association of Social Workers. And it's not a problem that they exist, but there's no other alternative. And I would say the exact same thing with the CSWE, the Council for Social Work Education. So, right, if I get any critique on my work as a social work professor, it's usually like you didn't conform with the CSWE's requirements for this class. And I'm like, well, what if I do it differently? You know, that's why I'm a professor. You know, got my education, and, you know, that's why I'm hired for the job, because of my creativity and my ability to do things differently. And so it seems kind of weird that you would want me to do the same exact assignment as somebody that's in New York City for my students in Alaska. That's kind of weird, right? It's a different context, whatever. But the point is that there's no alternative. And so the CSWE, Council for Social Work Education, basically has a powerful monopoly to do whatever they want. I mean, I shouldn't say whatever they want, but there's nobody to challenge them. There's no other, there's no organization that certifies or licenses a higher education, a college, a university, to give people a degree, a bachelor's in social work. So I was researching this. I could start a new social work program and teach social work and give them a degree, but they won't be able to get their licensure in any state in the United States with that degree unless it's certified, or whatever you call it, by the CSWE. So there's no room for any kind of dissent. You're forced to do it. And then the last point I have to make is that the problem that I believe that most social workers make, and I've made this before, is that you don't have any, you assume that they're good because that's what they are. They're the NASW, the CSWE. So they represent social work, so they equal good. And I'm not saying there's no good that comes out of any of it. What I'm saying is that just because you're these organizations does not equal good. And social workers take for granted that there might be alternatives or different ways to do things. And rather than ever even explore that there might be a different way to do things, or that we need an alternative, we just conform and go along and, you know, get right in line and sign up for the next NASW conference. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to the NASW conference. I'm saying that you should question things. You should look at it critically. You should ask why there's no alternatives. Why is there no other large social work organizations in the United States of America that, you know, social workers that don't fit into the mainstream, or that want to look for an alternative, or that, you know, just want a different perspective? Why does nothing exist there? And I don't know this, but I wonder if the NASW or the CSWE would operate the same way as the Democrats. And if there was, say we started this revolutionary social work organization or collective, and folks were really starting to join it, I think that they wouldn't try to talk with us. They would try to shut us out. And that's just a hunch. I don't know that. And I don't mean that on like smaller levels. I mean that on a big level, the leadership level.
I agree with you. I think just like the Democrats, like if you're not conforming, you get canceled just like that. You know what I mean? They're not interested in having a conversation. Now for the NASW, like I agree, like no shade to it as an organization, but I do want to question your partisanship. And I think that's fair game, right? And so like, and the fact that it's the only game in town brings me back to the point that, you know, we really do need to be decolonizing and like maybe founding those organizations that could replace, or maybe not replace, but be the NASW equivalent for us, you know, people who practice how we practice. And like you said, that stat is very interesting. Like I only just signed up for NASW like 3 weeks ago for the first time. I've been a social worker for over 10 years. You know what I mean? And I only did that just for, I told you about that off camera or off in our conversation. But, you know, so for only 50%, and I think you said the stat was 50% of folks weren't a member, 50% of social workers who graduated?
I don't want to say the stat. I just know it's hot. It's just high. I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah. So that says a lot. That says a lot. So it shows that a lot of people may not necessarily, and then especially going off this partisanship like angle, it may seem like a lot of social workers may not feel like they're represented by the NASW. You know what I mean? So again, I think this leads to more conversation around decolonizing, removing ourselves from oppressive systems, and then creating our own new institutions that actually do serve us.
Right. And we can only do that collectively because it is going to be shut down by these bigger powers that have full power and control over the whole monopoly of whatever it is, talking about social work right now. So if we stand together collectively, and that's the only way it's going to be able to change, I believe. We cannot do it within NASW.
Yeah,
you look at the stats.
60-40. So it's actually
60,
and that's just ChatGPT, so I don't have that as a fact. But ChatGPT says that 60-40.
It sounds
still
about
a lot,
right.
though, you know, for representation. So I'd have to look at what Detlef said exactly, because he did some research on it, and you know, obviously you can get numbers from a lot of different places, right? So the number of social workers probably varies depending on who's providing that data.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I've been choosing all these topics. Anybody else want to slide us in another direction?
I actually never thought about that point, Christian, until you brought it up. Like, this is like really the only entity that creates like these exams and things like this. And when it comes to social work in particular, like one thing I noticed, and like it's kind of annoying to me, is like why we have to take 2 exams in order to be fully licensed. Like you have to take a LSW exam or LMSW, depending on what state you're in, and then an LCSW exam to be licensed clinically. Where I feel like I don't think LPCs have to do that. I don't think marriage and family therapists have to do that. I think they each just take 1 exam, but I could be wrong. But that was my understanding. So I don't know. I think another thing we need to talk about, maybe like, not talk about it in detail, but as a profession is like, you know, is social work really leaning into, how much is social work leaning into like, the test taking racket? You know what I mean? Like when you think about all these exams you got to take, the GMAT, the LSAT, you know what I mean? And then like professional license. And then, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then like, you got to renew your license. You got to get CEUs and things like that. It's like, again, when we talk about neoliberalism and having people pay you rent, you know what I mean? Like, should we be creating passive income or looking to get passive income from our students and our people who are doing this work? Or should we really be a resource for them? Like, I understand there should be some dues because we got to keep, the central, the website up and things like that. But like, do we really need to be, you know what I mean? It just seems very money hungry to me. And is that a social work value? I don't know. I think that's debatable.
I think in Hawaii, you actually can skip the 2 exams. You can only have, if you want to be a clinician, you can take both, but I think you can just take the clinical license if you want, and you can take it early.
Yeah, that is true.
And you have it before you get your hours, before you do your hours. I'm not sure exactly, but something like that. Just to put it in perspective, it's hard. Most people that go into social work are not, super wealthy people. I'm sure there's some out there, but for the most people, social workers come from working class, poor folks and whatnot. And so you go and you get your bachelor's degree, and then you're like, I got to go on and get my master's. And so maybe you do the advanced standing and you work your ass off, or maybe you take 2 years, whatever it is. and you spend all this money. Maybe you took out a bunch of loans. You got to pay back now. And you get done with school, right? And you proved yourself. I passed the exams in my research classes. I wrote research papers, did all this shit. I did my practicum. My supervisor said I passed. And then you're done, and you're like, damn, I'm broke. I need to get to work quick so that I can start paying my loans and making up all, I'm tired of being a broke student. And you get out, and you realize you got to spend hundreds of dollars to go take an exam, and then you got to wait, and then you got to put some more $100, depending on where you're at, what state you're in. You got to pay a couple more $100 to get your license in. Sometimes that takes like when you were trying to get your license in Hawaii, she got a job, but they wouldn't let her go to work because the license didn't come through yet. So we had to go into the whatever it was, the government agency in Hawaii, and they're like, oh, we don't know what happened. You just have to wait. I was like, we can't wait. We're in Hawaii. We have children. We don't have any money. She has a job, and she can't go to work because you guys haven't given her a damn license. And I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. And I was like, well, we're not leaving until you could do something about it. And then the lady walks back. She's like, I can't deal with this anymore. And she walks out. Wow. And then the supervisor came out and handed her her license.
All it needed was a signature, but it took us storming that office and refusing to leave to get that signature so I could work.
If you can go through 5-6 years of school, including a master's degree with master's graduate level research courses, you can do 2 practicum internships where your supervisor there said that you're good to go. The test doesn't prove nothing, man. It doesn't prove anything. If you can get through all that stuff, then if you're taking a test and you can't pass the test, then something ain't right. Either the person didn't receive the right education and they shouldn't have been passed from the program, or the test is not applicable to what they've learned. You know what I'm saying? There's no other way around it. If you pass your MSW, you ought to be able to pass whatever exam it is. I'm not dissing people that don't. What I'm saying is that the problem ain't you. The problem is somewhere along the line, it's not a smooth transition. You know what I mean? And I just want to reiterate my point that it's an unnecessary, huge financial and time burden for folks that just graduated that need to go to work with the degree that they got. If it's not done in a timely manner, and if you don't have the funds to go spend hundreds of dollars to do it, and then it's high pressure, right? That could also contribute to people failing the test because they know they got to pass it because they got to go to work. Right. And if they don't pass it, it's going to affect them economically, their kids, everything, right? And so there's a high stress level around it, especially after they put in so much damn work already to get there.
Right. Exactly. No, it's insane. Did you have any thoughts on that, Ken, before
I just co-sign everything you said, Christian. It's just a total racket. And also I'm glad that you talked about like a struggling MSW grad student who just comes out and then realizes like, hey, this is going to be lucrative for me to even get up and running. You know what I mean? So yeah, I have nothing else to add to that. I think you ran it down pretty well.
Madness, absolute madness. No, I was going to shift it to so with revolutionary social work, when we talk about the transformation from within that we can then help the communities we're working with, and the workshops that you're planning or putting on, I know when we talked to you previously, the topics that you touched on were ones that we were like, oh my goodness, like the world needs to hear these and have access to these, because even in like schools, children are not learning about how to manage their finances, how to just budgeting, even to write a check back in the days, right? Or to open a bank account. Like, we're not learning that in school. And so how are we expecting our communities, our children, ourselves to be able to thrive without that education? So I just thought maybe if you could talk more on the workshops that you're doing, all the topics, like why they are so important to you.
Okay, so most of my topics so I like to tell people that I'm multidisciplinary. So I have a degree in political science and African American studies, but then I'm also a social worker and a public health practitioner. So there's 4 different disciplines. And when it comes to personal finance, I don't know, I just really got into it. And in fact, I'll tell you a story. So during the pandemic, I was on LinkedIn doing some of the LinkedIn learning courses because I didn't have anything else to do. And I was doing some, investing courses and things like that. And one of them was taught by a lady who was an LCSW. I'm like, ma'am, why are you teaching personal finance courses as a social worker? And so I looked at her page, and then that's when I found out, oh, financial social work is a thing. And I was like, I never heard about this. So I looked around. University of Maryland, College Park has a program, but then there's also the Center for Financial Social Work as well. And that's the program I went through. And so you can be certified in financial social work. And like, so why do I offer these workshops specifically on personal finance? Because I feel like the revolution, like we're talking about revolutionary social work, the revolution is economic. You know what I mean? In order for us to even have the space to practice our social work the way we want to, we're going to have to build our own institutions, and that's going to take resources. You know what I mean? And so I feel like personal finance can also add to people's stress level, anxiety, and depression. You know what I mean? If your money is not right. And I feel like people getting their money right is another rung towards wellness, you know, because you're eliminating one source of stress, anxiety, and depression, you know. So I do a lot of things around financial freedom. Like, what does that mean? What is the FIRE movement? Like financial independence, retire early. I do a powernomics training, which is a shout out to Dr. Claude Anderson, his book, Black Labor, White Wealth and Powernomics. So it's like a short, it's a training on, kind of shortening those two books together. And then we talk about, asset protection, because that's one area where I feel like we really need to play defense in. There are a lot of people of color losing their homes, losing their land. And a lot of times they don't know what that means. And me personally, I want my community to stop going to probate, right? I want y'all to stop hiring these probate lawyers. I mean, they have lawyers that just know people are not going to do this stuff and just sitting there waiting for you to come to them, and they know they're going to get a payday. We shouldn't be giving them any business. We should have all our stuff set up. I love trusts. I love revocable living trusts, and I try to educate people on those too. And I'm hoping to partner with like a lawyer who does like estate planning to like really start doing these workshops around estate planning as well, beyond what I know. But and I do a credit card wars workshop, which is so I use credit cards the wrong way in my high school years, and I was one of those people that got preyed on in undergrad. Like, they came up to my dorm when I was at Westchester University and found me up for a credit card. So I said, you know what? All the interest I paid over the years, so it wasn't until like 2014. So I had a credit card from 2008 up to 2014, and I was using it incorrectly. Once 2014, when I got educated and I understood like the difference between a revolver and a deadbeat when it comes to the credit card game, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get every cent of interest I ever paid to y'all back. And not only that, I'm going to get y'all for y'all sign-up bonuses. I'm going to get y'all for all y'all miles and cash back. I'm going to get everything from y'all. And so now I travel all over the place, subsidized by the big banks. So I just call it karma, and I call it reparations. You know what I mean? Hey, if y'all did all this to redline people, okay, y'all can fund my trip over to East Africa. All right, thank you. So I teach people how to do this stuff. And again, personal finance is very personal. And even though I do my workshops, I do coaching on this too, and I do coaching for the credit card stuff too, because everybody's, like I said, personal finance is personal. Everybody's situation is different, and we have to work with you. And I have to work with you individually to get you to where you want to go or where you want to be with your goals.
Right there. Revolutionizing ourselves. It's just, I think it's so powerful, and I think we could probably do a whole podcast episode on it.
I think, we're just still doing with the delay. Hopefully the Riverside AI will tether that out. But what do you think about when we talk about finances and whatnot, intergenerational problems? We get in these intergenerational patterns, and obviously that's a big deal for African American folks that have descended from slavery, because we know where that started. When you don't start with any wealth, it's hard to accumulate any, and you get into these patterns. And it's just not with Black folks, it's with all kinds of people. I think even in my families, right, there's these patterns that get set up intergenerationally, and that you view yourself as this kind of a person or belonging here, and you don't see any mobility, which is the opposite of what the American dream is supposed to be about, right? You're supposed to be able to see yourself no matter where you're at as somebody who can foster change in their own trajectory and, accumulate wealth or move up that ladder. But intergenerationally, we often get in these patterns where we don't even see it as a possibility, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you get people to shift their entire vision from being so closed to saying like, look, I can't fit anywhere, to like looking like, actually, the opportunity is there for you. You just don't know that you can take advantage of that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
As this fixed position in society.
Right. I love the terminology you use. It's like, it's really about getting people to zoom out and look at the big picture. You know what I mean? And I also have a workshop called Breaking Generational Curses. And in that one, that's where we really get into a lot of things. Like we talk about not only the strength that required for the person who chooses to do the work to break generational curses, but also like, because it's really like doing a lot of inner work, right? And also connecting with understanding your habit energies, right? Like, why do I do A, B, C, and X, Y, Z in this situation? You know, I never really thought about it. And now I'm sitting down and having a moment of self-reflection and self-critique and like really trying to understand like why I do A, B, C, X, Y, Z in A, B, C, X situations, right? So it's about really understanding what these habit energies are, and then like understanding like breaking generational curses is not easy. You know what I mean? It's very, very hard. And a lot of times the people who are in your family are going to be some of the biggest people holding you back from doing that work too. You know what I mean? So I think you know, focusing on habit energies and also doing that inner work goes a long way with breaking these generational curses and getting to, because like, I mean, I know one person, for example, who his mom just will not let any of her children even like get life insurance for her. And I'm trying to understand, like, why is that like something that she would be resistant to? You know what I mean? And it's like, and so I think it may be education. Like, can we just sit down and like, okay, this is what life insurance is all about. This is what it's for. This is how it works, and this and that. You know what I mean? This is the concept. But I don't know. Her mentality is, I don't want anybody making money on me after I die. And I'm like, that's the wrong way to be looking at this. Like, you have 4 children. This is about, you know, making sure any debts that you have that are unresolved, they can take care of it. It doesn't fall on them, among other things. But like, you know, it's just, I don't get it. So we need these personal finance education workshops in our community. And I feel like a lot as social workers too, we need to be focused on a lot of times. Like, well, let me preface this by saying I'm not a capitalist at all, but I may practice I practice capitalism with the credit cards. I can tell you that much. Like, and I practice capitalism with people who are outside of my community, but inside my community, I practice mutual aid with all my people. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah. So I'll just leave it there in terms about the generational curses piece, but I'll probably will have some more to say about that because it's a lot of stuff I'm not thinking about right now. I'm not thinking of right now.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I think we could do a podcast episode on every one of your workshops. I'm appreciative that you're out in the world spreading this message, and it's what revolutionary social work's all about. So I'm sure we'll have you back again to talk more on it.
I think too, we have Ken and I, independent of this podcast, but I have another podcast called The Critical Social Worker through University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Ken and I are working on a project right now that we're just waiting on the funding approval. We'll know at the end of this month, but we're gonna run like some dynamic workshop / podcast dialogues with students at UAF this fall and into the spring. So we're just waiting on that, but we're excited about that. So I like that you said we could dive in deeper on those topics, because on at least 6 of them, we're going to go deep for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
The world needs to hear it.
Yeah,
sure.
we have even more than 6, so we have plenty of content that we can like really get into and deep dive, and I think the students will enjoy it for sure.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I'd love to talk to you all day, but I can hear our kids bouncing around. Their movie's over, and I gotta plan my modules for my students still today. So it's been great talking to you. Like Alicia said, not only with the Critical Social Worker, but here on the Revolutionary Social Work podcast, the idea is for us to continue these dialogues and to continue to go deeper and deeper and explore everything it is that we need to explore, you know, which is much more than we'll ever have time for. So I can guarantee we won't run out of important things to talk about.
No.
Absolutely.
No, I'm just very grateful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom and dialoguing with us. So there'll be many more.
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoyed chatting with you guys. Love that you invited me into the space, and I'm really grateful to be a part of this. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and I'll get this up. I try to post them on Thursday, so I'll get it the main episode put up Thursday, and then she does little clips, and she'll post those throughout the week. But we'll be in touch about this project and the other ones, and we'll schedule another one for Revolutionary Social Work podcast. And if you tune, I just want to thank everybody that listens to this or watches this episode. And just to let you know, we got some big things coming with revolutionary social work. The universe is aligning in such a way that's pushing it forward just when it needs to be pushed forward.
Yeah.
And I've been introducing revolutionary social work in detail to my students, and the students are like, the reflections I get from my students are, why has nobody else ever talked about social work like this? You know, this is exactly why I joined social work, and you know, they want it. And so, especially with the people coming into social work, you know, we got to provide that alternative so they don't end up having to conform to something that they never intended to. Rather, there's something that fits or is malleable that can fit what they're looking for, and we can make real revolutionary change in me and you and us, and help other folks do the same moving forward. So stay tuned for it. I just wanted to say that I'm excited about it. Thanks again, Ken. Thanks, Alicia. It was a great conversation, great dialogue, and it won't be the last one.
No.
Awesome.
Have a great day, Ken.
Thanks. You too, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Take care, bro.
All right, bro. Have a good
Take
one.
care.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.